Ghouls and Fiends, welcome once again to another edition of the Ministry of Horror. I'm your host Tez, and we are finally getting a show in. At the time of recording, it's a Sunday, and I'd kind of planned on recording this week's show on Friday. Friday didn't happen. It was going to then be Saturday. Saturday didn't happen. So it's ended up being Sunday, but the good thing about doing the show now is I do have another film to review. Previously, I just had two films that we're going to be discussing. Those two films being the retro-ish, it's a few years old, film, the sequel to Hell House LLC, Hell House LLC 2, The Abaddon Hotel, and also the Netflix horror based on a quote-unquote true story, The Deliverance. But I am just back from the cinema, where I've just been able to watch Speak No Evil, the Blumhouse remake of the 2022 film of the same name. So later on in the show, we will be reviewing that. Also, you'll hear my thoughts, you'll hear what are highs and lows, and I will give a score out of 10. Outside of that, I've kind of just been watching old slashers, really. We reviewed last week a couple of Texas Chainsaw films that I hadn't seen in a little while, revisiting them. And since that point, I've also revisited Part 3, which I do enjoy. It was the introduction of the hockey mask. And also, potentially my favourite in the franchise, and that's Part 6, Jason Lives. There's so many things, though, I'd forgotten about it that are just quite silly, which I do enjoy in it. But Jason jumps into frame quite a bit. I don't remember him being that much of a jumper. And also the James Bond knockoff title card. It's quite funny. I liked the campy nonsense of how Jason comes back. It's very fun. But I'm not going to be reviewing those. They're just watching, just because I fancied watching them. And also I watched the Nightmare on Elm Street, the original Nightmare on Elm Street, and I'd forgotten how much of a bop a lot of the music is in that. It's a great film. It's a classic for a reason. It's up there with the best of the series, of course. The originals usually are. So I've watched those. I haven't done much gaming, especially not any horror gaming recently. I haven't really had too much time to jump into Aliens. There's been no game streaming. And I guess on the point of streaming, one of the comments that I dropped in the Discord, or blurbs I put in the Discord, was in regards to the future of the live show streaming. No decision has been made yet on my behalf, but I have just been thinking about the structure and how the show originated as a live stream in the model of the Ministry of Slam. Back in the day when we started as part of the Ministry of Slam Network, MOS Network. And from that point, there's been a lot of great times doing the show as a stream. You know, we've been able to do some horror face-offs live streaming with lots of interaction from the live listeners in the comments. And a lot of the fun as well was doing the show, then chilling out and watching a horror film and watch parties. And we've discussed before that, you know, no watch parties does kind of suck. And when I'd returned with the show, doing it every other week, that was great. That was better for my kind of free time, I suppose. You know, doing the show on a Friday night every week can work in some aspects, but it can also be incredibly limiting in some aspects socially. So we jumped to every other week. That was working great, but then it felt like, oh, am I missing some reporting? You know, some hot news is dropping and it's not really being mentioned till 2 weeks later, at which point it's old news. So we brought in this format, recording a show. And I kind of prefer recording a show. I think basically where the live shows just were, for want of a better term, a lot quieter, and not being able to do the watch parties, and not really wanting to spend the hours required for streaming to kind of, you know, be an endeavor that generates anything, ultimately. I kind of just have been thinking maybe just moving this to recorded only and have it as like a proper podcast. I don't know. No decision's been made yet. We do still have the channel on twitch.tv/Tesius, but I'm toying with the idea of maybe doing a live stream on YouTube and just kind of see how it works differently between YouTube and Twitch. Maybe there's more traction there, maybe not. And in which case, we'll just look at just doing recorded shows. But as I say, no official decision has been made by me just yet. It's just a thought out there at the moment. But anyway, I think it's quite late on a Sunday night. So without further ado, let's just jump straight into the horror news, people. This is the news. Ho, 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 ho. There we go. This is the news. Now, as per usual, all my horror news comes from bloodydisgusting.com. Great site for all your horror news and editorials, reviews, and all that stuff. So, this first up is from John Squires. 10 new horror movies released this week, including The Substance. So, the latest movie from Indonesian master of horror Joko Anwar, who did Satan's Slave and Petigore and Nightmares and Daydreams, Grave Torture is now streaming on Netflix. Joko Anwar's Grave Torture: when a violent act kills her parents, Sita vows to debunk the idea of supernatural torment after death, a fixation that leads her on a dark quest. The full plot synopsis for the film is on the Wikipedia page. After both of her parents become victims of suicide bombings, Sita becomes distrustful of religion. Since then, Sita's goal in life has been only one. To find the most sinful person, and when that person dies, Sita wants to go into his grave to prove that the torment of the grave does not exist and religion is not real. However, of course, there are dire consequences for those who do not believe. Farindawar Mufti, Riza Rahadian, Christine Hakim, and Salmet Raharjo star. It's based on Anwar's 2012 short film of the same name. I've seen Satan's Slaves, Part 1. There's a second film. I haven't seen that one yet. It was decent. I'm not familiar with the other films or Nightmares and Daydreams we've discussed on the news. I haven't got around to watching it yet. But interesting. It's on the to watch. Next up, after scaring up 6 million in theatres early this year, Neon's horror movie Cuckoo, starring Hunter Schafer and Dan Stevens, is now available on digital at home. The film will be also available on Blu-ray and DVD starting October 22nd. Following his festival sensation Luz, which I actually had to look up, and I have seen Luz. We streamed it on the RIP watch parties, and it's pretty good. It's very weird, but it's pretty good. German director Tilman Singer has once again succeeded in creating an atmospheric and visually outstanding horror trip with an original plot and perfidious twists. Cuckoo features Euphoria star Hunter Schafer in her first leading role, hailed as a terrific final girl performance, alongside exhilarating performances from Dan Stevens, Jessica Henwick, and Greta Fernandez. Cuckoo had a very, very interesting looking trailer. I never got around to seeing it at the cinemas. It had a very limited run near me. And it just, during the time it was on, I just didn't really have an opportunity to get down there and watch it. So I will be keeping an eye out for this when this is showing up at a reasonable price to rent at home. I've heard mixed things on it. I've heard, all style, no substance in places. Other people saying it's brilliant. So I'll make up my own mind, and I trust people will too. Next up, formerly titled They Listen, Blumhouse's new horror movie Afraid tackles the threat of AI, and it's available on digital just 2 weeks after its theatrical release. You can rent the film for $9.99 or purchase it for $14.99. John Cho and Catherine Waterson star in Afraid from Sony, Blumhouse, and Depth of Field. The film released in theatres on August 30th. In Afraid, Curtis and his family are selected to test a revolutionary new home device, a digital family assistant called AIA. Taking smart home to the next level, once the unit and all its sensors and cameras are installed in their home, AIA seems able to do it all. She learns the family's behaviours and begins to anticipate their needs, and she can make sure nothing and no one gets in her family's way. Afraid is written and directed by Chris Weitz, Havana Roselu and Lakita Maxwell, David Dutzmarchian, and Keith Carradine also star in the AI horror movie. I haven't heard much about this. I am aware of it. I think I saw a trailer a little while ago. And I know it has been available in the UK cinemas, but again, I haven't had the opportunity to get down and see this one. So I don't know what the buzz is about it, but it being available 2 weeks after theatrical release isn't promising. But I don't want to speak ill of the title. Next up, directed by Zoe Kravitz and formerly titled Pussy Island, MGM's Blink Twice was released in theatres less than a month ago and is already now available at home. You can rent the film for $19.99 or purchase it for $24.99. Naomi Aki stars alongside Channing Tatum in Blink Twice, with the film's impressive ensemble cast of familiar faces also including Carl MacLachlan, Adrian Arjoa, Alias Shawkat, Simon Rex, Haley Joel Osment, Christian Slater, and Gina Davis. In Blink Twice, tech billionaire Slater King meets cocktail waitress Frida at his fundraising gala, and sparks fly. He invites her to join him and his friends on a dream vacation on his private island. It's paradise. Wild nights blend into sun-soaked days, and everyone's having a great time. No one wants this trip to end, but as strange things start to happen, Frida begins to question her reality. There is something wrong with this place. She'll have to uncover the truth if she wants to make it out to this party alive. Kravitz wrote the script alongside E.T. Feigenbaum. So I haven't seen Blink Twice, but I have heard it is pretty good and worth a watch. Some dark subject matter in places, but yeah, not seen it. But I'll keep an eye out for this, especially now it's coming to home. Although looking at that price, it's the premium home premiere rental costs, which a little bit rich. Moving on. Best known for playing Annie Brackett in John Carpenter's original Halloween, Nancy Loomis, aka Nancy Kyes, returns to the screen for the first time in over 30 years in the horror anthology Hauntology from Gravitas Ventures, released onto VOD this past Tuesday. In addition to Nancy Kyes, aka Nancy Loomis, who did Halloween, Halloween 2, Assault on Precinct 13, The Fog, the cast also includes Samantha Robinson, Zoe Luna, and Naomi Grossman. Director Parker Brenn's Hauntology features 4 ghostly vignettes. In this queer horror anthology, 12-year-old Venus runs away from home, but their journey is cut short when their older sister, Jasmine, spots them wheeling a suitcase down the sidewalk. Jasmine then takes Venus on a journey around Ohio, where Jasmine tells supernatural tales whose characters have more in common with Venus than they first realise. An anthology horror, generally there's a story in there that you're going to like. Not always the case, but usually there's something decent. Speaking of anthologies, I did recently try, finally, to get round to watching VHS 3 Viral, the one that's been rated the worst, and I just never got around to watching, considering I generally like the series. Yeah, I got 2 stories into it and I really struggled. Like, the quality drop from the first 2 is significant. So it's really quite a wonder that the series has survived part 3. I don't know if it gets any better, but I've done about half an hour of that and it was bad. So maybe there's a good story in there later on. Not sure. Not going to hold my breath. Next, director Coralie Farget is back with brand new body horror movie The Substance, starring Demi Moore, which is now playing nationwide theatres courtesy of Mubi. Here's how the Cannes Film Festival website describes the film. Have you ever dreamed of a better version of yourself? You should try this new product, The Substance. It changed my life. With The Substance, you can generate another version of yourself, younger, more beautiful, more perfect. Just share the time. 1 week for one, 1 week for the other. A perfect balance of 7 days. Easy, isn't it? If you follow the instructions, what could go wrong? The Substance also stars Margaret Qualley and Dennis Quaid. The film is written and directed by Coralie Farget. Yeah, the trailers for this look pretty mad. I would definitely like to give this one a watch and just kind of see how the film compares to the trailers, because the trailers look mad. Definitely on my radar. Next up, the new horror film from director Alexandra Arya, who did High Tension, The Hills of Eyes, and Piranha 3D, and Cruel, Never Let Go was released into theatres nationwide by Lionsgate earlier this week. Academy Award winner Halle Berry is leading the film's cast. Percy Daggs IV, The Last Days of Ptolemy Grey? Don't know. And Anthony B. Jenkins will star alongside Berry. The Lionsgate horror film follows a mother and her fraternal twin sons who have been tormented by an evil spirit for years and are convinced to never let go of their family's protective bond. But when one of the boys questions if the evil is real, their connection is severed, triggering a terrifying fight for survival. Aya is directing the script by Kevin Coughlin and Ryan Graspy. The film will be produced by 21 Laps, Sean Levy, Dan Cohen, and Dan Levine. Saw the trailer for this actually at the cinema today. Yeah, looks like it could be kind of interesting. Trailer doesn't want to give too much away, but it does kind of have that question of, is there really some sort of evil out there, or is that paranoia from the mother? Who knows? Who knows? But there's buzz. There is some buzz about that one. Next up, the werewolf movie Lord of Wolves howled its way onto VOD outlets today. Lord of Wolves is the latest from director Charlie Steeds. When his housemate dies under mysterious circumstances, Nick inherits a mysterious pyramid-shaped contraption, unwittingly summoning a cult of wolf people who dwell in the dark. Okay, I mean, the image looks hokey. Okay, I'm not familiar with Charlie Steed's previous film Ghosts of the Deep, or Gods of the Deep, I should say. Nor am I familiar with Joshua Tonks, Jake Watkins, Rosie Edwards, and Michaela Longdon. I haven't watched the trailer. Can't really judge too much on that, but the image alone looks shonky. So there's that. God, we've got quite a few more to go through. Next up, a night shift in a rural roadside diner transforms into a harrowing siege in Last Straw, the feature directorial debut by Alan Scott Neal. It's available now on VOD from Shout Studios. In the film, a young waitress working the overnight shift alone at a rural roadside diner finds herself in a fight for her life when she's terrorized by a group of masked assailants. With no one to turn to, she will do everything she can to survive the night, even if it means striking back. Jessica Belkin, Jeremy Sisto, and Taylor Kowalski star in Last Straw, which features a screenplay by Taylor Sardoni and original score by Alan Palamo. I feel I recognise the actress in the artwork who's apparently on American Horror Story, but I can't pinpoint where in that. I've watched a fair chunk of American Horror Story, not all of it, as we've discussed previously. Jeremy Sisto I remember from May and Wrong Turn. So I have a feeling I've seen a trailer for this and it did look pretty decent. But will we get a release of this in the UK? Probably not in the cinema. It's on VOD, so I don't know. Some point in the future we may get it. Who knows? Next up, Patricio Valladares, the director of Hidden in the Woods and Night World, had his black metal horror movie Invoking Yell released on VOD by Welcome Villain Films today. Invoking Yell follows a trio of metalhead 20-something girls who venture into the woods to shoot the demo tape for their black metal band, Invoking Yell. However, things take a sinister turn as they document their disturbing and unorthodox process of recording paranormal phenomena to be used in the album's final track. Maria Jesus Marcone, Marcelina Carrier, and Andrea Ovalevich star. Valardes and Barry Keating, whose credits include Downhill, wrote the screenplay. Don't really know a lot about this or anyone involved, but films surrounding black metal normally kind of interesting. Just because it's quite an interesting subculture of metal. I've always got an interest in it, but to be honest, whenever I've actually listened to black metal as a fan of metal music, it's not really for me. It's not, death metal, sure, speed metal, thrash, power metal, but black metal's never really been my thing. So, but films about it, sure, give it a go. And that is it for the new horror films. We've we've got through that list. Next up, uh, Wolf Creek Legacy. John Jarrett says third movie returns to the original movie's tone. This is from John Squires. After 2 movies and 2 seasons of a TV series, Outback murderer Mick Taylor will return in Wolf Creek Legacy, recently announced as both the third installment and something of a reboot of Greg McLean's horror franchise. But have no fear, John Jarrett is back as Mick Taylor. What can we expect from Wolf Creek Legacy? Speaking with David Clare Bennett for his YouTube channel, John Jarrett teased a tone more in line with the original Wolf Creek. It's dark and creepy again, Jarrett teases. It's more like the first one. With the second one, we had a bit of fun, cracked a few jokes. For this one, the dark, creepy thing is the ultimate when it comes to playing Mick, just creeping up and being scary. Jarrett adds, speaking about Mick Taylor, he never runs, never yells, never dies. The actor notes in the same chat that the team is hoping to begin production sometime early next year, with a potential release around the holiday season in 2025. Sean Leahy will be directing Wolf Creek Legacy. So here's the plot. This time around, it's a family of American tourists who wander innocently into Taylor's hunting grounds. When the parents sacrifice themselves to save their children, the kids find themselves alone, lost, and hunted in the vast Australian wilderness. With this fresh prey, 2 wily resourceful Zoomers prove harder for the aging predator to consume. The cast will also include Jay Ryan. I did enjoy the first Wolf Creek, but it's one of those films that for me was a one watch. I don't really have any interest in watching it again. I think it's because where it was based on a true story, and I don't know how much of the truth came through and whatnot. I never really looked into it. I did find that it was coming out at this time of a number of films that were just really quite dark in subject matter, with the antagonists prevailing essentially. And you can call me a sucker, but I do enjoy, the antagonists getting their comeuppance at some point. Yeah, and I know that's very cliche and that's very typical Hollywood, and sometimes it's a lot more interesting and different when things don't go the way of our protagonists. But I do remember watching the original and being like, that was intense, that's pretty good. I've never had an interest to return to it. And I think because of that, I never got around to watching the second film or the TV series, because I just had it in my head, what's going to be the point, because it's going to kill them all. And it's probably then that's costing me some good entertainment. I've not heard anything bad about the second film or the TV series, but yeah, it's not really been a series I've gravitated towards. Maybe I need to give it a revisit. Maybe in the future we'll do a Wolf Creek episode. We should at some point do an Australian horror episode. I think there's quite a lot of quality Australian horror out there. So finally, in the new news, there's been other news about Terrifier 3, but I feel we talk about Terrifier every week, and I do appreciate that Bloody Disgusting are one of the companies behind the Terrifier series, so of course they're going to promote it a lot. Yeah, I don't want to talk about Terrifier films every week. I'm interested to watch Terrifier 3, but I don't want to talk about them every week. So finally on the news, The Conjuring, Last Rites. Mia Tomlinson and Ben Hardy join the 4th installment. John Squires write-up. Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga will be back at least one more time in The Conjuring Last Rites, and Deadline reports that Mia Tomlinson and Ben Hardy have also signed up for the upcoming installment. Michael Chavez is returning to the franchise to direct The Conjuring Last Rites, which is reportedly set to be the final installment in the main series of The Conjuring movies. The Conjuring Last Rites will release in theatres September 5th, 2025. David Leslie Johnson McGoldrick wrote the screenplay for the 4th movie. Franchise mainstays James Wan and Peter Safran are on board to produce. The Conjuring films are based on the real-life case files of paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren, played by Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga, respectively. In addition to another movie, The Conjuring is also headed to the small screen. A series for Max was originally announced in April 2023, and development continues here in 2024. I am a fan of the Conjuring series. I like the majority of the Conjuring universe output. I know the Curse of La Laureana isn't really, for some reason, considered anymore to be part of that universe, even though it previously has been marketed as such. And there is a character crossover, I'm sure. But I've enjoyed most of the output. The Nun, the first time I watched it, wasn't that impressed, wasn't that fussed. But a subsequent watch, I had a bit more fun with it. And the Nun 2, I enjoyed. The Annabelle films, it's the second one that I like. I think the original Annabelle film was okay, but it was quite a drop down from The Conjuring and The Conjuring 2. And then the third Annabelle film, I know it's quite popular, but I find it a bit boring. Annabelle Comes Home, and I know I might be in the minority there, but wasn't that fussed with that. But the Conjuring, Devil Made Me Do It, I thought was pretty good. Conjuring 1 and 2, I think, are really good. So I'm on board. I'm on board with this one, definitely, of course. There we go. That is it for the latest in the horror news. That was the news. Ho, 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 ho. And that brings us straight along to reviews. And first up in the reviews, Hell House LLC 2, The Abaddon Hotel. So, Hell House LLC 2, The Abaddon Hotel is a 2018 American direct-to-streaming found-footage horror mystery film written and directed by Stephen Cognetti, a sequel to the 2015 film Hell House LLC and a second installment in the franchise. Its plot centers around a group of journalists who have gathered to explore the Abaddon Hotel, which has once again been abandoned following the events of the prior film. The film was released on Shudder on September 20th, 2018. So, I had seen the original, and I was pretty disappointed, to be honest. I'd heard a lot of buzz around how Hell House LLC, it's brilliant in terms of modern found footage, in terms of just general found footage. Absolutely brilliant. The buzz that I'd seen online in various sort of like horror groups, everything seemed to be very positive about it. So my expectations were quite high. And a little while ago, I eventually got around to watching it. And I was quite disappointed. I enjoy found footage quite a bit. It's a franchise that can be done incredibly effectively. Not a franchise, so it's a genre that can be done incredibly effectively. And there's a multitude of ways to capture creepy moments in found footage. But it is, as with quite a few subgenres of horror, incredibly oversaturated and something where people can overassume what can be scary or forget the importance of story and believability in acting in place of just getting some creepy corner of the eye moments. I will admit there's a couple of creepy moments in the original Hell House, and I do need to give it a rewatch. But I wasn't that bowled over enough at the time to watch the second film or the third film, Lake of Fire. But that being said, one of the new films a little while ago was The Carmichael Manor, the prequel and sort of sequel to these films. Now, bear in mind, I couldn't remember much about the original film and I hadn't seen any of the sequels. I thought The Carmichael Manor was pretty darn good. It had a story that would probably make a bit more sense to me if I had seen the other films in the series, or refreshed my memory at least on the first film. But it did a good enough job of providing backstory to some of the elements that are featured in all the films to my knowledge, whilst also capturing terror pretty effectively. It's all very well having these chase sequences, but you've got to balance that with moments of just building up tension and making you as a viewer want to hold your breath. That's something that I do feel I need to revisit the first film and see if it does that, and see if I maybe wasn't paying attention fully, or how my opinion may change. Saying that though, Hell House 2 is a marked drop in quality from even the first film, certainly in comparison to the Carmichael Manor. Um, we'll talk a little bit about the plot, and then we'll jump into highs, lows, and I'll give you a score. So the film begins with Wendy Mallet recounting her tragedy when her son Jackson Mallet broke into the abandoned Abaddon hotel never came out more than a year ago. A video shown in which Jackson runs frantically around the hotel begging for help before having a mental breakdown. A cult follower is seen slowly approaching him. On October 6th, 2017, Susie McCombs is presenting a Hell House LLC special program with Arnold Tasselman, Mitchell Kavanagh, Diane Graves' co-worker from the first film, and Brooke Davis as guests. They start discussing the veracity of the Hell House documentary. Arnold points out that he tried to take down Mitchell's documentary, arguing that it is a hoax that is causing damage to the town's reputation. While Mitchell reiterates that Diana and her cameraman died inside the hotel and it is not a safe place to go. A journalist team from an online blog is watching the program. Its presenter, Jessica Fox, claims that with the help of Mitchell, they can break into the Abaddon in hopes of a spike of popularity for their website. They meet with Mitchell outside the Abaddon hotel, who says that breaking in will not be easy, as the police is patrolling around the hotel to prevent any more disturbances, such as the one of a teenager who broke into the hotel and disappeared while live streaming his adventure. On another video, a couple picks up a strange woman asked to be dropped off at the hotel, only to be revealed as the ghost of one of the tour goers that died in the hotel attraction back in 2009. So the narrative jumps between these TV set interviews with various people discussing the documentary, and then jumping to various people who have gone into the house. There isn't really anything scary in this film. There's a moment where they're walking through this these basement corridors, and they turn a corner and there's someone there, and it's a bit of a jump scare. But outside of that, even the clowns can't add much to this. The makeup looks a lot cheaper than the first film. There are a couple of moments when they're walking through these areas full of props and mannequins, and there's just a really crappy ghoul makeup on a girl who it just doesn't look very good. She, when she opens her eyes or suddenly changes her gaze to look at them, it's meant to be a big, oh shit, she's alive, but it's not. It just looks corny as hell. I mean, the pacing in this is kind of decent, but the acting is really quite poor in places. And as the film leads to its finale, there's this moment of a big reveal with various of these cult members, and this big monologue from a reveal of the villain. Oh, it's my plan all along. You need to make a decision. I just thought it was really, really corny. I will at some point watch the third film and see if it, picks up, if it does anything better. And I will give the first film a rewatch at some point. But I can understand how the massive fandom of the first film hasn't followed on with at least this sequel, because it is a big drop. 3 out of 10 for Hell House LLC Part 2, The Abaddon Hotel. Crap. It was crap. There's not much more I can say than that. Next up, we are going to review the Netflix exclusive The Deliverance, a Lee Daniels film. It's a 2024 American supernatural horror film directed by Lee Daniels and written by David Coggeshall and Elijah Bynum. Inspired by the Ammons haunting case, it stars Andra Day with Rob Morgan, Caleb McLaughlin, and Juan Ellis Taylor, Tasha Smith, Omar Epps, Monique, and Glenn Close. Based on the Jackson family in Indiana, they move into a house where they soon experience strange demonic occurrences that eventually convince them and the community that the house is a gateway to hell. Okay, so, right, we'll talk a bit about the plot. Ebony Jackson is a mother of three. Eldest teen son Nate, teen daughter Shantae, and youngest son Dre. The four of them just moved into a new home, their third in a short time frame. They are joined by Ebony's elderly mother, Alberta, who has cancer and recently become a Christian. Unbeknownst to Alberta, her insurance stopped covering treatment. To prevent a change to a lesser care facility, Ebony's been paying for it out of her own pocket. This has put her in arrears on many expenses, sending her into collections. Complicating matters further are Ebony's personal issues. In addition to having a criminal past that includes serving time in prison, she also has a history of alcohol abuse and when drinking becomes physically violent with her children. This has led to the intervention of Child Protective Services, and she has been assigned care worker Cynthia, with whom the family have a contentious relationship. Dre starts talking about and to an unseen presence whom he calls Trey, whom he says takes residence alternatively in the basement and bedroom closet. A dead cat appears in the basement, where there is a large hole in the unfinished concrete floor, and on multiple occasions, Dre has gone there only to be found afterward in a catatonic state. Okay, so first off, if you want to see something pretty good surrounding the Ammons haunting case, I never thought I'd be an advocate for this person, but check out Demon House, which is a Zach Bagans documentary. Now, my sister's a big Zach Bagans fan, big Ghost Adventures fan, and I've watched the odd Ghost Adventures, but really the best long form episode of that, and it's more of a feature documentary, pseudo documentary, I believe the term is Demon House, because that covers elements of the haunting, whether you believe or not, and I'm very much a skeptic that's a bit open-minded. That was a lot more entertaining. The thing with the Deliverance, the performances themselves are pretty good, I should say. Glenn Close is a bit of a weird choice. It's just quite odd seeing her being a bit of a slutty grandma. I can't think of the last thing that I saw Glenn Close in. I didn't know she was still working, but yeah, that was a bit different. Yeah, the difficulty is we have a protagonist who is quite verbally and physically violent at times to her kids and to everyone around. So that does make it a bit more difficult to root for them when they are fighting evil. But here we are. I do appreciate, though, it's kind of the opposite to The Exorcist, where The Exorcist was a very well-to-do, very wealthy woman whose perfect family is a perfect life and daughter is upturned with the infestation of a demonic entity. And with this, it is a family who've gone on hard times. Money is very tough, working very hard. There's a lot of history of abuse and difficulty with the law, and encountering what appears to be a demonic possession. It goes some ways to show the various stages of infestation, with the different children all having a moment of some form of possession. One of the kids takes a dump in class and then throws it at the teacher. Another one has a period and just stands and lets it all fall on the floor. I can't remember what the other kid does. I think he starts scratching up his chest and causing blood and stuff. I found this film was a bit long, and that could be my attention span, or it could be that it's a little bit dull in places. Performance-wise, it was decent. No one's particularly bad in it, but it didn't fully click with me. It's one of those things where it's based on a true story, but it is ramped up to the realms of complete ridiculousness at times. I mean, it's nicely shot. And as I mentioned, the performances aren't particularly bad, so I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. There's not really too much more I can say on it. It was there. It was all right. It was better than some other horror that's on Netflix in terms of newer, more modern horror. But it's very much middle of the road. It didn't really do much for me. And it, like as I say, understand the protagonist's issues, but it's difficult to root for someone that's openly smacks a kid in the face in the opening 5 minutes of the film. Yeah, not for me. Deliverance 5 out of 10. And then finally, Speak No Evil 2024, American psychological horror film, written and directed by James Watkins. A remake of the 2022 Danish film of the same name. The film stars James McAvoy, Mackenzie Davis, Eileen Francesi, Alex West Leffler, Dan Ho, and Scott McNairy. Its plot follows an American family who are invited to stay at a remote farmhouse of a British couple for the weekend. The hosts soon begin to test the limits of their guests as the situation escalates. Jason Blum serves as a producer through his Blumhouse production banner. So, when holidaying in Italy, American couple Louise and Ben Dalton and their daughter Agnes meet and befriend free-spirited British couple Paddy and Chiara and their son Ant. Back home in London, Louise and Ben are at odds over Ben's unemployment and Louise's infidelity. A letter arrives from Paddy and Chiara inviting the Daltons to their remote farmhouse in the countryside. The family decides to go, hoping the change of scenery will be good for them and for Agnes, who has anxiety and is attached to a stuffed rabbit toy. So that's probably all we need to really say. There's a lot of trailers going around for this at the moment, and that's become a little bit of a meme, is when will this film finally come out, because then we don't need to see the trailers for this in the cinema anymore. So I went into this with mixed expectations. I'd heard that reviews were pretty good for it, and I remember thinking that's kind of surprising, purely on the basis that an American remake of a foreign language film that only came out 2 years ago is a little bit of a recipe for disaster. I mean, James McAvoy's a good actor. It's very good. And once I'd realised that James Watkins was writing and directing this, who'd previously done Eden Lake, I did think, okay, is there a potential that it will go to the places that the original went? On the basis that if you haven't seen Eden Lake, it is a very good film, but for me, it was a one-watch film. I can't bring myself to watch it again because it encapsulates tension so well through long periods of it, and it is such a tragic final act that it leaves you speechless. You know, it's the sort of thing that I would, if it was on TV, I wouldn't go, I'll give this another watch. I've seen it. That's enough for me. But with the original Speak No Evil, that too has a finale that left me quite speechless. Part of the feel for the original film is these moments where you're just on edge. You're basically screaming at the screen, just get out the house, just leave now. And you do get that in this. James McAvoy's brilliant in this. One of the things I wasn't expecting was the humour. And that does sound a bit at odds with all this tension, terror, terrifying. But by having these moments of humour, it builds up why they become so enamoured with Paddy and Chiara. Is because he is kind of like the alpha male that brings the beta male in Ben under his wing. Because Ben is kind of everything Paddy isn't, and vice versa. And so, he is very boisterous, he's very loud but funny, and that is part of this charm that brings them in to their world. But as time is ticking, they basically are pushing the boundaries with Ben and Louise. And that is, again, something that the original did very well. There's this whole feeling of, oh, God, our protagonist is just too polite. There has to be a moment where you just go, look, I'm sorry. thank you very much having us in your house, but this isn't right. We need to leave now. Thank you very much. Bye. Um, I think this version does potentially portray some of those moments slightly better. You still have moments, especially when it comes to Agnes and her stuffed rabbit, where you just want to go, "What are you doing? You're crazy." But I feel in this scenario, in this version, I should say, some of the scenarios, the intimidation side of things has worked a bit better, um, and is played up in a way where normally you would go, well, if the bunny rabbit's there, you would just leave it. But now, knowing what they know, as the film progresses, without getting into spoilers too much, it makes a little bit more sense because of the intimidation, but that doesn't release any of the tension from the scene. There are beats from the original version that are replicated here, but it isn't a shot-for-shot remake. The story unfolds slightly earlier in this film, and I think that was quite a neat choice because it doesn't entirely play out as the original does. The final act of this film is a little bit like Straw Dogs, and I think that was quite a smart choice. I did wonder whether this would go to the realms that the original did, and without going into spoilers, it doesn't go to the levels that the original did. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, I don't think. I was glued to the screen throughout this. The only thing that I would say, and this is more of a blanket statement, nothing to do with this film, but just to cinema goes in general. If during a film in the cinema you feel the need to be on your phone, screen brightness up, or if during a film in the cinema you feel the need to have conversations at any point during the film, but at obnoxious levels throughout, you're an asshole. Ultimately, I love the cinema. A lot of people love the cinema, but you don't pay money to hear other people yabbing throughout the entire film. And unfortunately, Speak No Evil, I mean, yeah, it was an evening, early evening, late afternoon screening, so it's quite busy, quite popular screening. A lot of people in there, but there was a lot of chatty Cathys who did my head in at places. I've seen worse screenings where people loudly talk from start to finish, and I've had conversations with them after the film, in not so polite manners. But just don't do it. If you feel the need, like, oh, I've paid my money, I want to do this, I want to do that. Yeah, but other people have paid their money not to hear you be a dick. So there's me getting off my soapbox. I've been on my soapbox. I've had a little rant. I'm now off my soapbox. Back to the film though. The score relays the tension very, very well in this. I really like the performance of Mackenzie Davis as well, who really takes the charge when things are kind of going to shit. She is the one to kind of step up. But you've got quite this layered relationship where it isn't just a case of he's a weak man, she's a strong woman. There are layers there. There's kind of reasons for that are explored, and it is quite multifaceted. I think the performance of the kids as well. The kid playing Ant did great in this, considering he couldn't talk. And as things are being revealed, like he tries to pass a note to Agnes, but the note is all in like German, I think, adds another layer to it where you look at it and go, maybe he just hasn't learnt to write and read and write yet. But it's done really, really well, actually. I don't really have any negatives. I generally wasn't expecting to enjoy this quite as much as I did. And initially, with the score I want to give it, I kind of think, oh, does that seem a bit high? Is that a bit much? Is that recency bias because I've just come out of the cinema? But no, because normally I'll come out of a film and go, yeah, that's good. That's good. I need to ruminate on that. I need to sleep on it and see what I think in the morning and see which bits stuck with me and which bits stuck out for the wrong reasons. But I came out of Speak No Evil with this feeling of, damn, that was really good. Actually, that exceeded the expectations going into it as someone who's seen the original. So on that basis, I don't really think there's much I can knock it down for. I'm going to give Speak No Evil 9 out of 10. I know that's a very high score for the Ministry of Horror, where I tend to give everything 6. It feels like at times. But no, Speak No Evil, I thought was really good. If you have seen the original and you hold the feeling of, well, it's obviously not going to be as good, I would say give it a go. Maybe it helped that I went into this with low expectations. But maybe give it a go. I dug it. I dug it. 9 out of 10 for Speak No Evil. And that is it for another edition of the Ministry of Horror. I'll be back next week. I'm going to again record a show because I've got a busy week doing a lot of horror celebrating. Just put it out that way at the end of the week. So be sure to watch your horror films, play your horror games, listen to your horror music, or whatever you do. Check out the Twitter or X at ministry_horror. TikTok, Ministry of Horror. Instagram is Tez Elliott or Tez.Elliott. It's just Tez Elliott. Sorry, I've all of a sudden got the burps now. So, and the YouTube, check out the YouTube channel. Give us a subscribe, like the videos, podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Give us a follow on the podcast platform of choice. It really helps spread the word. That is it for me, Tez. Have a great time. I'll catch you later.